2024 has been kind of a weird year for horror, and I just kind of wanted to stop and just look at the state of the horror genre in general and just talk about what we have coming up with the genre in the future and where I hope the genre will go and what I think us as an audience can do to make that happen. So, I think starting off, what's made this year an odd and not great year for horror is just the bigger studio horror movies have not been very good. Where you got Imaginary and Night Swim, two of Blumhouse's big movies, and I haven't checked them out yet, but the footage I saw in the trailers was not good, and the reviews really swayed me. I'm planning to check them out at some point, but that was not great. Then we had the new movie Tarot, and another one where the trailers did not sell the movie and just looked bad. Reviews came out bad. I saw The Strangers Chapter 1, and I thought it was just a disappointing remake, like almost shot for shot of that original Strangers movie, and just such an odd movie to exist because it offers nothing new, and it's just a worse version of a good movie. The Strangers is a good movie, so Strangers Chapter 1 is just a shot for shot worse version of that. And we have other stuff that came out this year, like Abigail, which that was a bigger studio movie, and I thought it was really fun, really enjoyable. It's in my Radio Silence ranking. I talk about it more. I really enjoyed it. You'll see it's pretty far up into the ranking, but it flopped at the box office and did not do well. So it's just kind of an odd year for horror. And talking about those big studio releases, I think that's part of the problem, where I think that in horror, I don't think that those studio releases really aim to be just these really good horror movies. There's some that do. I think Abigail did try for that. I think The First Omen, that was another studio horror movie, and while I didn't love it like some people did, I think it's an effective horror movie, and it has some like truly shocking images. So that one was effective, but I think these studio horror movies, they don't really go to scare audiences. They just try to please as many people as they can. That's why if you look, a lot of Blumhouse's movies lately have been PG-13. Megan was made to be an R-rated movie, but given how it looked to TikTok audiences, they edited it down to PG-13. And you'll look, we had Night Swim, Imaginary, those were both PG-13. And it's okay to have horror be PG-13, but it does restrict what you can do with the gore and how scary you can make the movie, where you can look at something like The Conjuring. That movie is not great at all. The only reason The Conjuring is rated R is because it's just so intense that they didn't think younger audiences can handle it. So it's kind of a fact. There's only so much you can do with a PG-13 horror movie, but it can work. I think the original Insidious is an example that PG-13 horror can work. A Quiet Place 1 and 2, some of my favorites. They can work. But usually when you aim for more PG-13, you have to focus on another element, like the thriller and the emotional angles with A Quiet Place. And so sometimes they can work, other times not so much. But I think what the problem with studio horror is right now is they're just not trying to make them as scary. They're just trying to get audiences to come in. So I think that's one thing we really got to work on, is just trying to make horror movies inventive and scary. And that's what makes me so excited for some of our new horror releases coming out, where I think Maxine and Longlegs, those are bigger releases. They got a pretty big amount of marketing. They're still not like big studio releases. They're smaller studios releasing them, but they're getting some big headlines, get big attention, and they're just something interesting where you watch the trailers for those movies and they are super unique, super interesting. And so watch those trailers and then watch the trailer for Smile 2 or The Strangers Chapter 1. And while Smile 2 could be good, I think it has an interesting premise, you just see it, they're trying something so new with Maxine and Longlegs. And that's just what makes them feel like special movies. They're trying to genuinely scare the audience. And I want more movies like that. I think the best horror movie by far this year is Late Night with the Devil. I loved that movie. I thought it was awesome. Just so unique and inventive. And it's a different kind of scary. It's so atmospheric, but it never lets up on the horror. It's an intense movie, but you don't need jump scares. But studios feel like they've cracked the code and they can make these horror movies that just have a jump scare a minute. but the characters are awful, the script is terrible. That's not how you make a movie. You want to make a movie that is a solid movie, and if you have some good jump scares in there, that's just a plus. So it's easy to see why studios do this. Horror is one of the easiest genres to make, where you can make these movies for super cheap. There's so many horror shorts online, and think about all the directors that got their startup in horror. I mean, the Saw franchise was like an independent horror movie to start. There's so many examples of it. Like Lights Out, that started as a horror short online. Night Swim even did too. So it just, you can make horror for so cheap that all these studios, they can churn out like 10 movies a year and they're not worried if they're good because they know they'll make their money back. That's literally Blumhouse's strategy. They make them cheap, make a lot of them, and don't care if they're good or bad. But that doesn't make for movies that the audience truly wants to go see. But I feel like audiences want to be challenged with horror movies. They want to be scared. You go to horror for just something special. And I think we need to bring that back. And I think really the way to look and find that is looking at smaller horror movies. Sure, they might not always be great. I'm looking forward to checking out In a Violent Nature soon. I haven't heard it's amazing, but I just think it's so inventive and unique. And that's what I want in horror movies. Take the X franchise. That trilogy, each movie is super distinctive. And I can't wait to see Maxine for that. I think the idea it's going with the 80s aesthetic, the Night Stalker serial killer angle, that's just so interesting. And I can't think of another movie that does something like that. Horror, it needs to evolve. And I think with where studios are taking it, it's devolving. It's getting just simpler and simpler and simpler. And not the unique and creative genre that I think lets a lot of artists thrive in it. When an artist is just given the chance to go wild in the horror genre, you get special stuff. Like, take a look at Barbarian and Talk to Me. Those movies don't work for everyone, but they are unique and they are inventive in the genre, and that's what you need more of. The worst thing you can do in horror right now is just make stuff to make money. And the worst example I can think of is the public domain horror movies. We have so many on the way. I've seen both Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey movies, and they're awful. They're not good at all. I didn't like the first one, and I heard that the second one was going to be fun, more entertaining, but it's not. It doesn't take itself way too seriously. Honestly, they were both pretty boring, and that's a shame because I feel like those movies could just add they could itch that 80s slasher itch that people have, where just fun 80s slasher, but instead they really just want to make money off these famous franchises, and that's not what we need. We want cool, unique, creative, or even throwback. You can do something similar to other stuff, where just have like a throwback style slasher. That can work too. I thought the Fear Street movies were really good at that. But just when you keep trying to make these generic, low budget horror and just don't put the creative care into it, it doesn't work. So I'm hoping that Hollywood's starting to learn the right lessons. I mean, you had the David Gordon Green Exorcist Believer movie that did not do well. Everyone hated it. But the studio reassessed, and now we got Mike Flanagan's Exorcist movie coming out, and I am super excited for that. He brought a new, distinct style to the Shining franchise with Dr. Sleep, so I think he can do something really unique with The Exorcist. And that's the thing. By saying that you need to try with these movies, not just make cheap, no thought put into them, low-budget horror movies, it's not saying that. It's saying that you just need to put care into it. And you can do that with a sequel. That's not saying you can't make sequels. I hope that The Strangers Chapter 2 and 3 add something new. And I'll be there to check them out. But you can absolutely do sequels. I would love to get more Jason. I'd love to get more Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger. I just want to see a unique thing done. And that can be in a bunch of different ways. You can even have a unique remake and just do different filming styles, a twist on it. Just, you can tell when something's made with passion and when something's not. And I mean, just look at it. You had Late Night with the Devil, which just so much passion and care. And you have The Strangers Chapter 1. And it's just crazy to think about how the horror genre is just all over the place right now. And it's crazy thinking that we came after, this is just a couple years after 2022, which was an insanely good year for horror. So I'm hoping that we get a little more solid horror movies this year. I think that next year the slate has some awesome sequels, and I really hope to live up to expectations. I think that Terrifier 3, Maxine, Longlegs, those are all really interesting horror ideas. So I'm just hoping that the horror franchise, we get some better movies later in the year. And yeah, it's just a genre I love. So just kind of want to talk about it and just talk about why I think that just trying to make them as cheap as you can, but then not actually trying to make them as good as you can, I don't think that's the best way. I think you need to just take your time with these movies and not rush out for as cheap as you can. You need to like just put a lot of passion and care, because then you get something special. And when you get an awesome horror movie, that's just awesome. It's so much fun watching that genre. So I'm hoping that we get some good horror coming out soon. And yeah, thanks for watching. And please check out Maxine and Longlegs in theaters. All the other reactions are saying they're awesome. And if you haven't yet, definitely check out Late Night with the Devil. I would highly recommend it. And also, one last note, A Quiet Place Day One. As a filmist, I haven't had the chance to watch it yet, but that's another one. I think, even though it's a sequel, or technically a prequel, I feel like it's doing something unique. And yeah, definitely just go support the genre and support the ones that deserve being supported. So thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe.